What's up guys, it's Endymion, and today I want to talk about the most anticipated game of the first half of 2022, and my most anticipated game as well, Elden Ring. And before I begin, if you love gaming news and games like Mass Effect, Dark Souls, or The Witcher, consider subscribing. Thank you, it gives my life meaning. And a disclaimer, I could be wrong about all of this, but that's what's fun about FromSoft games. There's a lot to speculate on, so let's begin. Elden Ring is, as many know, the next game from the highly acclaimed Japanese studio From Software, and from the moment we saw gameplay of their next game, the visuals and style of Elden Ring seem to be both different yet strangely familiar. Of course, studios have styles, and From Software is no different, but from its inception I've always wondered if Elden Ring would be a sequel to FromSoft's previous trilogy of games, Dark Souls. A lot of people say it isn't, while others just can't say yet since the game isn't out yet. But I do want to touch on what one of the primary creators of Elden Ring had to say about it, which is the author of Game of Thrones, George Martin. George, back in 2021, was interviewed on a Chicago radio show, and among the questions was asked about his work on Elden Ring, in which George straight up, and I quote, "I've played some video games, I'm not a big video gamer, but the game is called The Elden Ring and it's a sequel to a game that came out a few years ago called Dark Souls, and it came out of Japan." End quote. Now, even when the literal guy who wrote the mythology and overlying structure and characters for Elden Ring said this, fans were still not convinced. Of course, Elden Ring would have connections to previous games, sort of how Sekiro and Bloodborne and the Dark Souls trilogy all have things that connect them, like bonfires or shrines, losing souls permanently if you're unable to grab them after you die, and so on. But me being me, I wanted to dive deeper than this and see if there were any other connections I could make between Elden Ring and Dark Souls. For starters, Elden literally means to age or grow older, and a ring is, well, it's a ring. It's spherical. As we know by the end of Dark Souls 3, there's various endings, but ultimately the world that Dark Souls inhabits deems a few things absolute and true. One is that the cycle always repeats, and a cycle is visualized as a circle or a ring, perhaps if it's any connection to Elden Ring. And that these empires like Lordran, Drangleic, or Lothric in each Dark Souls game are each born and buried and built on top of one another in the next cycle. This is why you can basically visit Anor Londo in Dark Souls 3, but it's from a previous cycle. Another connection between the ring motive and Elden Ring so far anyway is that we know that in the game you play as the Tarnished, who's tasked with collecting the pieces of the Elden Ring in order to wield it. Apparently anyway, again, the game isn't out yet, but there's one huge point of interest that is evident in almost every trailer or screenshot of Elden Ring, and that is the gigantic, majestic world tree in the distances of the lands between. As many Dark Souls fans know, Miyazaki derives heavy inspiration from the Japanese manga Berserk, from the brand of sacrifice in Berserk being inspiration for things like the Dark Sign in Dark Souls, or almost literally being identical to the Hunter's Mark in Bloodborne. Not to mention enemy types in various Souls games being almost direct copies of Berserk characters or monsters. I mean, even Millennia, a character in Elden Ring, has an almost identical look to Farnes from Berserk, with the helmet being an obvious homage. So I'm sure, like many fans of Berserk, we all looked at the trailer of Elden Ring, saw the big ass tree in it, and went, it's the world tree from Berserk. So in Berserk, the world tree is a massive celestial tree that connects the realms of the physical and astral worlds. To put it simply, the tree is like a nexus point. It connects everything. Basically, it's actually kind of similar to the idea of the world tree in the Dragon Quest games as well. So if we can see the connections between things like the Brand of Sacrifice and the Hunter's Mark, then the same can be said for the world trees of both Berserk and Elden Ring. In theory, perhaps the world tree in Elden Ring is like that in Berserk. It's a nexus point, a beacon that connects the lands between, which is where Elden Ring takes place, and other lands, worlds, or realities, maybe even universes we don't really know. We need to also address that in the Dark Souls universe that reality and time are fractured and incredibly unstable. I mean, we're able to travel back in time in the original Dark Souls to fight Artorias, for example, and time is completely messed up in Dark Souls 3. What I'm trying to say here is that reality and time are concepts FromSoft and Miyazaki have tampered with and used to create unique scenarios that allow the player to access moments and events that would be otherwise impossible. I personally believe that the name of Elden Ring's world is no mistake. The lands between literally states that it's a world between worlds, a place that exists in a space that could be outside of the perception or reality of, say, Lothric or Lordran, which again isn't a new concept to FromSoft with Bloodborne's mechanic of insight. And the big connection here is the similar concept of cycles, with each Dark Souls game repeating itself eternally, with each cycle bringing life and death, creation and destruction, and so on to the world that Dark Souls takes place in. Maybe Elden Ring, like its world's name, The Lands Between, suggests, is that Elden Ring's world is some sort of purgatory, a meeting point between universes. And the Elden Ring is apparently, to our knowledge, an artifact of indescribable power, possibly capable of who knows what. Time travel, creating life, it sounds like it could be Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet melted down into a single item of immense power for all we know. And lastly, I want to address something else that has to be a reference or possible story idea in Elden Ring. Like I said originally, Elden means to age or grow older, and a ring is spherical. It repeats, it loops. And the way we can tell how old a tree is by counting its annual wood growths, which, when you look at them, are, well, they're rings. And these rings tell you how old the tree is or how Elden it is. So how is this all connected to Dark Souls? Well, I obviously can't prove that just yet since the game isn't out yet, but I firmly believe there is more of a connection here than just it's made by the same developers. The aesthetic and design of Elden Ring seems to fall much more in comparison with Dark Souls than any previous From Software game. Not to mention that Bloodborne is owned by Sony PlayStation and FromSoft partnered with Activision of all people for Sekiro. But the Dark Souls franchise and Elden Ring both have something in common here as well. They're both tied to Bandai Namco. And I think there was a reason FromSoft went with Bandai again here. It may be because FromSoft just likes Bandai Namco, but I think it's because the IP of Dark Souls is technically owned by Bandai in the first place, so in order to make a sequel of some sort to Dark Souls, well, you'd have to work with the same publisher again. And that's exactly what's going on with Elden Ring. So, is Elden Ring a sequel to Dark Souls? I'm gonna wager and say yes it is. Of course, I could be wrong and Elden Ring is just a separate entity completely, but with George Martin saying what he did, and with all the examples I've laid out in this video, I'm confident mostly in my assessment. Hopefully I'm right. If not, well, it's always fun to speculate. That's what these series are all about anyways. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing the video to give my life meaning. Thanks to my patrons for their support as always, and I'm Endymion. Elden Ring is almost upon us. Excuse me while I go and platinum Dark Souls. I'm so close. I just need a few more weapons and then I got it. Anyway, thanks for watching.